For 100 years, nothing in this world could kill a dragon in open sky. Not spears, not arrows, not the massed armies of kings. A grown dragon's scales were harder than steel, and the men who loosed their bolts at one seldom lived to load a second. Then, above a Dornish castle called the Hellholt, a single iron bolt found a dragon's eye. This is the story of the one war Aegon the Conqueror could not win, the war that turned the sands of Dorne to glass and cost the House of the Dragon a queen. When Aegon rose from his coronation, 6 kingdoms had bent the knee, but the work of conquest was not quite done. In the Bight, the 3 sisters crowned a queen of their own. A northern fleet and the shadow of Vhagar soon changed their minds. On the Iron Islands, drowned priests and would-be kings tore at each other until Aegon descended on Balerion and ended them. One warlord slain by Blackfire, one holy man walking into the sea with his robes full of stones, calling on a god that never answered. And so, at last, all of Westeros south of the Wall belonged to the dragon. All of it, but one. Dorne. For a year, Aegon tried words. He sent lords and maesters and septons to Sunspear to reason with the ruler of Dorne, Princess Meria Martell. 80 years old, near blind, grown vast and heavy with age. Her enemies called her the Yellow Toad, but neither age nor blindness had dulled her wits. Dorne was not like the other 6 kingdoms. It had no great armies to burn in an afternoon, no proud castles begging to be broken. When the Dornish were threatened, they did not march. They vanished into the deep deserts and the red mountains and struck only when no dragon was near to answer. "You may burn us," they said, "but you will not bend us, break us, or make us bow. This is Dorne. You are not wanted here." Their words, unbowed, unbent, unbroken. In the 4th year after the conquest, the talking ended. Queen Rhaenys returned to Dorne, this time with fire and blood, exactly as she had promised. Riding Meraxes, she fell out of a clear blue sky and set the planky town ablaze, until the whole mouth of the green blood choked with burning boats. Then came the armies. Aegon marched through the Prince's Pass at the head of 30,000 men. His oldest friend, Orys Baratheon, led 1,000 picked knights up the Boneway. But the Dornish would not stand and fight. They burned their own crops. They poisoned every well. They barred the mountain passes with walls of rotting sheep. Aegon's host was starving before it ever reached the sands. And in the twisting stone of the Boneway, the trap closed. Boulders from above, arrows from nowhere, a rockfall sealing the retreat behind them. Orys Baratheon's knights were butchered like hogs in a pen, and Orys himself was dragged away in chains, a prisoner of the cruelest lord in Dorne. Will of Will, the man they called the Widow Lover. King Aegon fared better, for a time. He stormed one empty castle after another. At Ghost Hill, he accepted a challenge of single combat and cut his man down, only to learn afterward he had killed the Lord's fool. Everywhere he went, the enemy had simply melted away. Standing in the empty hall of Sunspear, Aegon declared victory. He named Dorne part of his realm, appointed castellans and wardens, and marched home. He had barely reached King's Landing when Dorne erupted behind him. Within a fortnight, every captured castle was retaken, every garrison put to the sword. Some kept alive for days, the Dornish lords wagering on who could draw out a man's dying the longest. The king's own governor of Sunspear was bound hand and foot, carried to the top of the spear tower, and hurled from the window by the aged Princess Meria herself. And Lord Tyrell, left behind to hold the south? He gathered his army, marched into the Red Sands, and was never seen again. Not one man of them. Ever. What followed was not a war of battles, It was a war of atrocities. When Orys Baratheon and his captured lords were finally ransomed home, they came back maimed. The widow lover had struck off every man's sword hand, so they might never lift a blade against Dorne again. Aegon answered with dragon fire, melting the keeps of the Wills to slag. But the mountain folk hid in caves beneath the earth, and the widow lover lived on. "Fire for fire," Meria said, when Dornish raiders burned half the Rainwood. And fire she got. Vhagar loosed upon Sunspear, Aegon and Visenya burning Sandstone, Vaith, and the Hellholt. Still Dorne struck back. Their armies burst through the passes into the Reach, burned the castle of Nightsong to the ground, and carried its lord and his family off in chains. They raided the very walls of Old Town and cut down a son of House Hightower. Year after year, the killing went on, and neither side would break. In the 10th year after the conquest, Aegon unleashed all 3 dragons at once. He himself fell upon Skyreach. The Senya brought fire to Starfall, and Queen Rhaenys, on Meraxes, returned once more to the Hellholt. The Targaryen dragons had flown through storms of spears 100 times. Their scales were harder than steel. Arrows only enraged them. But as Meraxes banked low above the castle, a defender on the highest tower triggered a scorpion, and a yard-long iron bolt caught the queen's dragon in the right eye. Meraxes did not die at once. She came crashing to earth in her death throes, shattering the tower and half the castle wall beneath her. Whether Rhaenys outlived her dragon, no one can say. Some say she lost her seat and fell to her death. Some say she was crushed beneath Meraxes in the yard. Some say she lived, only to die slowly in a Dornish dungeon. The truth will never be known. But Rhaenys Targaryen, sister and wife to the Conqueror, the boldest of the 3, perished at the Hellholt. The first dragon and the first Targaryen to fall. What came next, the maesters call the dragon's wrath. For 2 years, Aegon and Visenya burned Dorne without mercy. Every castle put to the torch 3 times over. The sands around the Hellholt fused into glass, so terrible was Balerion's fire. The Iron Throne offered a lord's ransom in gold for the head of any Dornish lord, and Dorne repaid blood with blood. The murders reached even King's Landing. The king was attacked 3 times. One night, assassins fell upon Queen Visenya herself in the streets. 2 of her guards died before she cut the last man down with Dark Sister, her own Valyrian blade. And in the blackest deed of that black age, the widow lover came uninvited to a wedding, slaughtered the guests, and left the bride to a fate crueler than death. By now, Dorne was a smoking wasteland, famine, plague, and blight upon a blackened land. And still, unbowed, unbent, unbroken. In the end, it was not dragons that ended the war, it was age. In the 13th year after the conquest, Meria Martell, the Yellow Toad of Dorne, died quietly in her bed. The woman who had defeated Aegon the Conqueror and all 3 of his dragons. Her son, Prince Nymor, had no taste for more slaughter. He sent an embassy to King's Landing, led by his own daughter, Daria, bearing the skull of the dragon Meraxes, and a single sealed letter, for the king's eyes only. Aegon read it upon the Iron Throne in open court, stone-faced and silent. When he rose, men saw that his hand was dripping blood. He burned the letter and never spoke of it again. That night, he flew alone to Dragonstone, and when he returned the next morning, he signed a treaty of eternal peace with Dorne. To this day, no one knows what those words contained. A father's plea, a list of all the dead, a curse written in Queen Rhaenys' own blood, or a threat against his infant son and heir, a boy named Aenys. The war was over. Dorne remained free. The one wound the dragon could never heal, a debt of vengeance handed down to wait for a younger, crueler king. Aegon the Conqueror would reign 24 more years of peace and die in his bed. But the throne he built of 1,000 swords would pass to a son who was never ready to sit it. And that is where everything begins to fall apart. Next time, on Fire and Blood. If you want to see the dragons turn against their own, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.